Have you ever watched an interview and realized the person speaking had no idea it would be one of their last moments in front of the world?
Yeah, I was doing the bitty bitty bum bum thing. I couldn't hear myself.
That is what makes these clips so chilling. A smile, a joke, a calm answer, a red carpet wave. And then, days or weeks later, everything changed. These were not ordinary interviews. They became final messages, frozen in time, from stars who had no idea their goodbye had already begun. Lisa Marie Presley. Lisa Marie Presley appeared on the Golden Globes red carpet, carrying a lifetime of history on her face.
Characteristics, mannerisms, the singing.
As the only child of Elvis Presley, she was born into impossible fame, yet spent her life trying to build her own voice through music, motherhood, and survival. In that final interview, she seemed emotional while honoring her father's legacy. Just 2 days later, she died after a medical emergency linked to a small bowel obstruction, leaving fans stunned. Tupac Shakur. And from one child of fame to an artist who became a legend by 25. Tupac Shakur gave one of his final MTV interviews
Ain't no other record company out there that sold as many records.
with the intensity of a man who felt time closing in. He was not just a rapper. He was a poet, actor, activist, and voice for anger, pain, and survival. 3 days later, he was shot in Las Vegas. And 9 days after that, hip-hop lost one of its most powerful figures, the notorious B.I.G. That shadow carried into the story of the notorious B.I.G.,
I just want my spot back, you know? I chilled.
whose final BET interview now feels almost painful to watch. Biggie had transformed from Brooklyn street storyteller into one of rap's greatest voices, blending humor, menace, confidence, and vulnerability in every verse. He was enjoying massive success, but also living inside the dangerous East Coast-West Coast tension of the time. Only weeks later, he was killed in a drive-by shooting in Los Angeles. And before the world could even understand that kind of loss,
Fans to be shocked, like, okay, what is she doing? I felt they could ride with me on.
music had already suffered a similar shock with Aaliyah. Her final television appearances showed a young star glowing with confidence, elegance, and quiet control. She had already reshaped R&B with her smooth voice, futuristic style, and crossover acting career. Just days after promoting her music and future dreams, Aaliyah died in a plane crash in the Bahamas at only 22 years old. Selena Quintanilla. That same feeling of a future stolen too soon follows Selena Quintanilla,
For education, therefore I think it's really important to take
whose final TV interview now feels like a farewell nobody recognized. Selena had risen from Texas family performances to become the queen of Tejano music, breaking barriers with charisma, style, and a voice full of warmth. She was preparing for bigger English-language success when her life was cut short. 13 days after that interview, she was shot and killed by her former fan club president, Bob Saget. From music's brightest voices to comedy's familiar faces, Bob Saget gave a cheerful TV interview in Orlando just days before his death. For millions, he was America's TV dad on Full House, but behind that image was a sharp stand-up comedian, host, and beloved friend in entertainment. He seemed energetic, grateful, and still excited to perform. Around 4 days later, Saget died after accidental head trauma in a hotel room, shocking fans who had just seen him smiling. Whitney Houston. That public smile also haunted the final days of Whitney Houston, whose Sparkle interview showed both pride and fragility. Whitney had once possessed one of the most extraordinary voices in music history, turning songs into emotional landmarks and becoming a global superstar across music and film. In her final promotional moments, she spoke about returning to the screen and celebrating the project. Shortly afterward, she died in Beverly Hills, with drowning, heart disease, and drug use cited as factors. Brittany Murphy. Then came Brittany Murphy, whose last interview now feels strangely delicate because she still appeared hopeful, playful, and full of personality. She had broken through with Clueless, then proved her range in dramas, comedies, thrillers, and voice work, becoming one of the most recognizable actresses of the late 90s and early 2000s. About 19 days after that final clip, Murphy died at 32, with pneumonia, anemia, and medication-related factors later reported. James Dean. Driving PSA. Long before modern celebrity interviews went viral, James Dean delivered one of the most haunting final appearances in Hollywood history. In a driving safety interview, the young actor warned people to be careful on the road. Dean had only a few major roles, but Rebel Without a Cause and East of Eden turned him into the symbol of restless youth. 13 days later, he died in a car crash, making that warning feel almost supernatural. Heath Ledger. That same tragic young star image followed Heath Ledger, whose final I'm Not There interviews showed an actor deep in transformation. Ledger had moved far beyond teen heartthrob fame, proving himself in Brokeback Mountain, experimental dramas, and eventually The Dark Knight. He seemed thoughtful, serious, and artistically fearless, always chasing roles that cost him something emotionally. Weeks later, he died from an accidental prescription drug intoxication, leaving behind one of cinema's most unforgettable final performances. Chester Bennington. The pain became even more personal for fans of Chester Bennington, whose final interviews are difficult because he still seemed open, funny, and connected. As Linkin Park's frontman, Chester gave a voice to millions dealing with anger, isolation, grief, and invisible wounds. His success was massive, but his lyrics often revealed the struggle beneath it. In 2017, he died by suicide, turning his final public words into something fans still revisit with heartbreak. DMX. That raw honesty also defined DMX, whose last Drink Champs interview felt like a man speaking from the edge of survival and faith. DMX rose from hardship to become one of rap's most intense and spiritual voices, selling millions while turning pain into prayer, bark, confession, and battle cry. He spoke openly about life, death, and struggle. Not long after, he suffered a heart attack linked to drug use and died days later. Mac Miller. A quieter kind of sadness surrounds Mac Miller, whose final major Apple Music interview showed an artist trying to grow beyond his public image. Mac started as a playful young rapper, but slowly became a respected musician, producer, and emotionally honest songwriter. His later work revealed maturity, vulnerability, and a search for peace. Soon after releasing Swimming, he died from an accidental overdose, leaving fans with music that sounded like someone trying to stay afloat. Lil Peep. That same fragile honesty appeared in Lil Peep, whose final Beats One interview with Zane Lowe now feels painfully young. Peep blended emo, rap, punk, and internet culture into a sound that spoke directly to lonely fans who felt unseen. He was only beginning to understand his own influence when the world started calling him a generational voice. Shortly after that interview, he died from an accidental overdose at just 21 years old. Juice WRLD. The next loss came with Juice WRLD, whose chilling final interview clips feel heavier because his music had always dealt with anxiety, heartbreak, and self-destruction. He became a superstar almost overnight with Lucid Dreams, then built a loyal audience through freestyle talent and emotional honesty. He sounded relaxed, creative, and still full of plans. In 2019, he died from an accidental overdose at 21, leaving behind a massive, unfinished legacy. Leslie Jordan. After so many young tragedies, Leslie Jordan felt like a different kind of heartbreak because he brought joy so effortlessly. In his final CBS Mornings interview, he appeared warm, funny, and grateful for a late-career fame explosion that made him beloved to a new generation. From Will and Grace to viral videos, Leslie turned personality into comfort. Soon afterward, he died following a sudden medical event while driving, causing a car crash. Prince. Then there was Prince, whose final major talk show appearance on Arsenio Hall reminded everyone why he was untouchable. Prince was not just a singer. He was a composer, guitarist, performer, producer, and style icon who controlled every inch of his art. Even late in his career, he carried mystery, humor, and genius with ease. In 2016, he died from an accidental fentanyl overdose, leaving behind music that still feels alive. Amy Winehouse. Few Final Days stories feel as painful as Amy Winehouse, whose last interview and footage show a singer trapped between brilliance and collapse. Amy's voice sounded old, wounded, and timeless, turning jazz, soul, and heartbreak into modern classics. Back to Black made her a global star, but fame also magnified her struggles. In 2011, she died from alcohol poisoning at 27, joining the tragic list of artists gone before their full story was finished. David Bowie. And finally, David Bowie turned even his ending into art. His last interview material and final creative appearances carried the quiet mystery of a man who knew how to leave the stage on his own terms. Bowie had spent decades reinventing music, fashion, identity, and performance, moving from Ziggy Stardust to elegant elder statesman without losing his edge. In 2016, he died from liver cancer, shortly after releasing Black Star, his final masterpiece. What makes these final interviews so haunting is not just how these stars died, but how alive they seemed only moments before the world lost them. Some were smiling, some were dreaming, some were still fighting quietly behind the fame. And that is why these clips stay with us, because sometimes the final goodbye does not sound like goodbye at all.